Right, let's make a start. Good evening, all. Very warm welcome. Thank you very much for joining tonight's webinar. Super excited to be on this, answering the top 5 questions about setting up a squat, and delighted to have a seasoned presenter, Dr. Bobby Vandal from Avenue Dental, with us this evening. Good evening, Bobby. Thanks for joining.
Hey, mate. Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Excellent. Yeah, looking forward to it. Tell us a bit about yourself, Bobby. Give us a quick intro.
Yeah, so my name is Bobby. Opened a practice in Leamington Spa around about a year and a half ago as a squat. Practice to date is doing very well, very successful. Couple of surgeries running, a mix of associates and myself. Doing all sorts of dentistry, lots of implant work, and as aside from that, I also help and train a mentor dentist who are setting up their own practices.
Excellent. Thank you. And myself, I'm Murray Welsh, with Anglian Dental. And just a bit of background, just Anglian, it's a family business. It was founded in 1991 by my grandfather. Started off as an engineering company, actually, going out and about in North London, repairing dirty, greasy, grimy suction pumps and all sorts of fun stuff. And over time, the business grew. And then in the sort of probably about 15 years ago, we moved more into the fit outside, designing and building dental practices. We kind of fell into a mistake, really. We ended up installing a lot of equipment to sites where services weren't ready, things weren't in the right places. We were wasting a lot of time, so we got stuck in and started doing our own plumbing and electrics. And it kicked off from there, where we started doing the full package. So these days we go in, we design it, we build it, we fit it out, and yeah, we're privileged to work with some of Bobby's clients. And I think last year we were involved in a total of 32 squats, so done a few. It's not just squats we do, but also refurbishments and expansions. So very much looking forward to sharing some of the tips and secrets tonight. So we put a bit of an agenda together for this evening, just to keep us on track. We're not planning on going beyond an hour, and look forward to questions coming in. If you have any questions, want it to be a participative time, so please stick them in the Q&A, and we'll try and jump on those at the end. So look forward to. There's no such thing as a stupid question. I think someone said once, if you've got a question, if you ask it, then you're sharing that question with everyone else. So don't hesitate. So tonight's webinar is about the 5 top questions, which we've got here, and we'll do a follow-on session. So in about 4 weeks' time, we'll run another session, and Bobby will be presenting his 5 top points, which more of a business and HR angle. So stay tuned, and yeah, look forward to a follow-on event in a few weeks' time. So with that, we'll jump in. So the first question we get asked a lot, which I'm sure Bobby does as well, and we'd like to try and share some insights in, is the question of what makes a good site for a squat practice. We often get approached by dentists looking to start out, and looking at lots of sites, different options, and it's a real question of which one they should choose. And there's a lot of variety out there, isn't there, Bobby?
Oh yeah, a huge amount.
Yeah.
For example, our practice was in a traditional end terrace that was built in 1905, which needed completely gutting and rebuilding. Whereas some people are setting up in brand new builds that are empty shells and probably a lot easier than what we did here.
Yeah, no, it's fair to say there's no right or wrong, is there? But there are some recommendations, and there are some things which perhaps easier if you go down one route than another. But there's no such thing as the perfect site, and there's no right or wrong. It's always possible. It's just getting there is sometimes there are different challenges. We recently did probably one of our most challenging spots ever was one in the photo here, Beam Dental, which you can see there, which was a squat in North London inside Brent Cross Shopping Centre. We've worked in the West End, we've worked in Harley Street, worked in the Canary Wharf, We worked all over the place, did in old houses, health centres, but nothing as challenging as inside a shopping centre. But it has some amazing pluses as well. So it's quite a variety we've seen really. What we often find though is the first thing is obviously location, and I mean everyone talks about location being super important, and for most practices it is. Um, it, but it does depend on what type of practice you're wanting to start, doesn't it, Bobby? If you're a referral centre, for example, high footfall isn't as important as if you're a general dentistry. But
Yeah, I was going to say, so I mean, the way I would split the question up is essentially starting from the point of sense, what do you want to do with your business? What do you want to build? And what type of dentistry do you want to be doing? And what type of patients do you want to be doing it on? And then that starts to give you a guiding point as to your location. So, if you want to be doing, a lot of small makeovers, Invisalign, you are high footfall, visibility, and you want to be in an area where that's populated well and seen by that demographic of patients. So it all starts with, your business plan and what you want to build. And that guides you then into the location. In that location, does it have the demographics of the people that I want to be doing that type of dentistry on? Are they there? And then, am I visible to them? And how visible can I be to them? That's what guides you to the right location. And then once you've got that, then you can start to think about, the site-specific questions. That's where you start thinking, well, okay, I've narrowed it down to this area now based on the business model that I want. And in this area, these are the type of buildings that are available. Now, if we take a deeper look at these type of buildings, what makes a good building? That's a great point for you to take on there, Murray, because you see a huge variety of buildings. So, what makes something suitable and not suitable.
Yeah, no, it's what you said is bang on. Start with the sort of the bigger picture and what you're trying to build, because that's your location in a wider sense is the most important thing, to be in the right area. Once you are, have nailed that, getting that site, I strongly recommend early doors speaking to someone who's had experience, an architect, a designer, and looking at the options with them. Feel free to share, addresses. You can tell a lot just from a desktop study these days before even going to site and looking at the pros and cons, because you see a huge variety. Some of the sites we would see where an old house or an old shop, very dilapidated. Some of them old banks, see a lot of old banks, and whilst it's all possible, there's some real red flags which from a building point of view we could pick up quite early and say, look, just from a fit out point of view, there's just way too much to do here, or you're limited because you're only going to get 2 or 3 surgeries here, or this is a great option because it's for different reasons. But general rule of thumb is if you can find an empty shell, we're big believers in trying to go for empty shells because it brings the fit out cost and the complexity right down. And for squats, that's often key. It's not always possible, but there's a lot of high rise going on in cities at the moment, and the ground floor of those often out for empty shells. You've got blank canvas, you can do what you want, you've got good services. There's no surprises, there's no floorboards to take up, and what you see is what you get, and you can shape it and design it exactly how you want it and get optimum use of that square footage. So we always recommend, it's not always possible, but I'd say that's probably the best to go for. Some other tips we pick up: trying to get ground floor. It's not always possible, but it is a benefit. Things like your DDA access, it makes the build easier as well, having just one floor. Challenges and loss of space through staircases. There's quite a lot of compliance around staircases with fire regs, etc. And anything you can do to avoid the need for that, you can work around it. But what would you say to that, Bobby?
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. I mean, just to give you an example, because we had such an old building where we built our squat, within the first week, we lifted the floor, and we have a cellar underneath, and the beams were completely rotten, and it hadn't been checked. So instantly, the cost of that project went up by £5,000 in the first week because that whole floor had to be replaced. And you don't get that in shells. And like you said, there's a huge amount of developments going on. I actually spoke with somebody today. These developers are very keen in these new sites that they're building, within city centres, outskirts, to put practices in them. It's a secure business for them. And some of them are even, willing to fund some of the development costs. So it's just something to keep an eye on for the future. But 100%, shells, it's much easier. And rightly, like you said, it keeps your costs as low as possible rather than having to gut an old building. What about switching residential properties into commercial properties? That's something that I get asked quite a lot, Murray. So what does that
Mm.
involve, and how does that look, and how easy is it or difficult?
Yes, same. It's a good question. And it's not easy at the moment, but it does depend on different councils and their housing policy, we find. Obviously, it needs to be Class E to become a dental practice, and a lot of councils have got housing targets to hit, and going from residential backwards, in their eyes, is a negative. It's not something they're keen to do. Sometimes there are reasons for it, though. If there's a lack of dentists in the area, or if you're lucky enough to have a contract, or I doubt you get a contract as a squat, but sometimes there's mitigating factors which do make it possible. Has been done, but it isn't easy. Moving residential to Class E. So always try and advise where possible, look for something that's already Class E, because change of use. We're just doing one at the moment in North London, and it's Sweden area, and getting change of use just delays it. Even if it's possible, it just it's another sort of 8, 10, 12 weeks, and a cost as well. So it's one of those things to try and find out early doors what the use class is, and you can normally do that. Speak to the landlord, should know. If not, you can speak to the local council, find out what planning class it is, because it needs to be Class E.
Yeah, brilliant. And then I think one of the things that gets asked really commonly, Maria, is typical sizes that you should be looking for. So, say for example, for an average, free surgery practice to fit that quite comfortably, with space for a CT scanning room, decent sized waiting room, DDA compliance, decon, what typical sizes do you see, or what's the average, to fit all that in comfortably?
Yeah, great question. What we find influences a lot is the shape of it. If you get a long, narrow, typical high street unit, you end up with a lot of space as a corridor, and then your surgeries are quite limited. So it does depend on the shape of the unit, but general rule of thumb, we find 1,000 to 1,200 is comfortable for three. You probably would get four in some units that size. Rough rule of thumb is sort of 400 square foot per surgery, roughly. I mean, that allows for like a bit of reception and waiting, decon, TCO, all those extra rooms. But for three, yeah, I mean, we've done three in sort of 800, I think, once, in North London. And you can squeeze it in, but yeah, you do end up compromising with staff rooms or storage, don't you? So how big is yours, Bobby?
Yeah, so we're about 1,500.
Yeah,
Uh,
good.
but yeah, it's a good size. But like you said, it's good to be comfortable. You don't want to end up going so narrow, like you said, that you end up then compromising.
Yeah.
So it's like you said, thinking about future proofing as well is a big thing. So, that all comes back down to the original business plan, and where you see your business, 5 years, 10 years from now. One of the biggest mistakes can be is if you're going to be starting something new, is taking on a unit that's too small, that then only services 2 to 3 surgeries with no potential then for expansion. Because then at that point, if you max that out, you're back at square one, and then it's a case of I either have to relocate, which is actually what's happening with quite a few dentists at the moment,
Mm.
even some of the ones that I'm helping. Or you end up then buying a second site or setting up another squat. Whereas if you were able to do all that and you're busy enough within the one site, your overheads are obviously a lot less. It's a lot easier and a lot more profitable to have one site that's running, 6 surgeries than 2 sites that are running 3 surgeries each.
Yeah, very much agree. And what would you say, Bobby, if someone says that want to start a squat, it's only going to have space for one surgery, maybe two? What would you say to that? Would you say go for it? What would your
So it depends on exactly what they want. So if they want to run that as a lifestyle business and they're going to be the main dentist working there for the foreseeable future and the rest of their career, then you can make that work. But if your plan is really to have associates in and pull yourself out, it won't work in the long run. It's not worth it.
Hmm. No, I agree. That's good. A couple other points just to consider, perhaps more details, but nevertheless important. Services, and we've come across this from experience with sites which have inadequate services. When I say services, what I mean by this is a water supply, which is big enough, power supply, which is big enough, and drainage, probably the three main things. Which dental practice needs a lot of power and it needs a lot of drainage, and having a plan for those. There's always ways around it, but sometimes you see some units which have very little drainage or very small power supplies because they've just been used as a shop before, and they never had aircon or air compressors or X-rays, and there's a lot of loading, electrical loading in a surgery. And if you're going over anything above 4 surgeries, you often need 3-phase power, particularly when you've got to heat the water and heat the place as well as run a compressor, etc. And sometimes that can be a real issue. Need a new power supply, and all of a sudden you've got waiting delays from the council or UK Power Networks to dig up the road. So best advice is get someone in early doors, someone that knows the pitfalls and the problems that you can come across.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just to, give an example, when we set this practice up, because we gutted it, and there's flats upstairs, we had to separate all the connections, all the suppliers, and we had to put in new suppliers. So, we had brand new water connections put in to supply the whole practice, and we had 3-phase power put in for the practice, which can essentially, fund run up to possibly 5-6 surgeries if we extend upstairs in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I said, that forward planning, but that process took a long time. At the beginning, and it comes at cost as well. It's important to know about that right at the beginning and discuss it with the architects and the developers, whoever's planning the project, to know that right from the outset, 100%. Because just give you an example, when they were putting our water connections in, Severn Trent, who supply us, couldn't actually find their water main in the road. So they had to come out and dig the road 6 times, can you believe, before they found their water main? And every time it had to be on a bank holiday or it had to be on a Sunday because it's stipulated by the council. And then they have to coordinate with highways. And you can see how complex it can get and how that can add. And yeah, that's the last thing you want, slowing you down.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Another question we get asked a lot is, do I need a disabled toilet? Question pops up the whole time, and challenging ones to answer, really, because the answer on these things is it does depend. But the short answer, and I need to qualify this, is you don't actually need a disabled toilet to function, but it does depend. And the best advice really is to talk to someone who knows about this and looks at the site, because what's important is what the existing provision is, and also the Disability Act, making sure you're not discriminating against a patient who potentially would need a disabled toilet, and having provision for them. So there are ways around it. It's not a no. If you can't have a disabled toilet, it doesn't mean you can't start practice there. But it's definitely preferable to have it, and every reasonable effort should be made to try and fit one in. But it's not a deal breaker.
Yeah.
Good. Moving on then. The next question is about design. So we're a big believer at Anglian Dental in planning and designing properly, because we've seen the results of inadequate design in a project. And there's a saying which says, a job well planned is a job half done, and that's very true with a practice. A lot of the time, assumptions are made, or mistakes are made, or projects are delayed because it's not clear before work start what's actually happening. And we firmly believe that if a project's well designed and all the detail is agreed and thrashed out before the first tool is lifted, it will happen faster. The project will complete sooner. There'll be less variations and there'll be less surprises. So thoroughly recommend doing a proper job with the design. And every company and project have a different approach to a design, but we see design in 4 simple steps, which I've laid out here, and I'd like to get Bobby's input on this as well. But step 1 we call general arrangements, commonly known as GAs, and this is fairly high level. So I'll just show an example of a GA shown on the screen here. This is not a lot of detail. It's just simply showing where your surgeries would be, and at early stages this shows where you can fit how many rooms you can fit in, your rough costs, and that's great for a planning point of view. And it's quite important you know this when you're building your business plan. And a lot of time this can be done relatively low cost or sometimes even free. If you can get a survey, an existing floor plan of the building, give it to someone who knows what they're doing. We can design out where the surgeries could go, how the layout could be, and it gives you a pretty good blueprint of a general arrangement of a practice. That is what we're called step one, which is like a initial doors. Would say as a point of advice is when you've got a site you're looking at, early as possible, speak to the landlord, see if you can get hold of a measured plan or an accurate floor plan, because without that you can't really do much for a GA. But if there aren't floor plans, then you have to get it surveyed, which I'll come on to as point two. So point two is
just before you get somewhere, I just want to mention one of the biggest things that I've seen, or one of the misconceptions, is that some dentists have been to certain designers, say for example, and had general arrangement plans like that drawn and assumed that you can build from those. And what you're going to go through next essentially explains why you can't build from a drawing like that and what that involves.
Yes, good point. Yeah, sometimes we get approached by customers asking for quotes, and they'll send us a GA, and there's just there's a huge amount of detail lacking. So any quote that is provided, what's it for? The age-old thing is to quote for as little as you want, and then sting the client with the extras, which is just it's not ethical at all. So the right approach is to go to the detail, get all the detail thrashed out in the design, so that when you're getting costs, you can everything you need, everything you want is in there, and spend some time on the design, because it can really come back and bite you if you try and just rush and get started without properly thrashing through exactly what's going to be. Every room, every wall should be elevated really, and see exactly what you're going to be getting, which we'll come on to with the next step. Step two, we see this as a variable. And now, not every project. What I mean by that is not every project requires this. But some sites, depending on the specifics of that site, will need things like listed building consent if it's a listed building, might need planning to get change of use, it might need structural surveys if there's beams, or you want to knock walls which you're not sure if they're structural or not. And sometimes they can influence the success of a practice, how many surgeries you can get in. We did a project last year where it was really only a 2 surgeries site, but if they could take out the central wall, it would have been a 4 surgery site. So it was like a deal breaker. So we went through a GA process, we went through a structural survey, found out that wall, it had a huge lintel to take it out. It needed, basically a digger in there to dig the footings for it. It wasn't going to be worth it, in which case, that site was dropped and we found a different site. So it's worth sometimes going into the detail early on to find out how feasible a site is. Step 3, we class this as interior design visualization, which to a degree is optional. Would recommend getting an interior designer in and someone who knows about design and help you visualize the practice, because a lot of the time I think looking at a plan, 2D plan like shown here, it's hard to picture that. Whereas when you can visualize something, I'll try and show you an example. It's much easier to just picture it and know what you're getting really. So we would be able to draw up 3D visuals, show examples of finishes and colors, and allows you to picture what you're getting. And this really helps bring the practice to life, helps improve first impressions from patients, helps model it out, and you can then discuss the finishes and mood boards, and get an ambient for the practice and give the practice a character, really give it some personality and make it match your brand, which I think is really important. The fourth stage
is part of marketing material as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, very good point. Yep. Graphics on the front coming soon. Yep. 100% agree. And the fourth stage we would classify would be a technical drawing, which I would say is probably what Bobby was referring to earlier, which is about going through, once you've agreed your GA, going through that. And usually this takes a few weeks to achieve. And how we would do it is to set up some meetings, regular meetings with the customer, and start to get into the detail, where your lights are going to be, what your floor finishes will be, how the cabinets will be laid out, where your computer point will be, where the X-ray will be, the positioning of the chair, suction pipework runs, the compressor lines. Every aspect of your project needs to be designed out and a drawing pack produced together. Now, this is important. It's a journey, and it's a two-way thing, so that yourself as the founder has input right into the detail throughout the whole practice as to exactly what you want, where your computer points need to be, the screens, the sockets, everything needs to be designed out and put onto a drawing. And then when you come to do the project, it's just about implementing an already agreed design. It makes your life a lot less stressful, a lot less questions and decisions to be made when the project's live. So, you know, all the decisions are, you want to try and get as many decisions confirmed before works start. Good thing about that is you can also use these drawings for building control. So you submit these to the building control officer and get their approval before work start on site, which is I think it's often forgotten, is get the before work start on site, building control to approve the plans. They obviously won't sign it off, that comes right at the end of the project, but building control should be approving the plans and giving comments before work start on site.
Yeah, I see this as a really common area of confusion amongst a lot of dentists when I'm speaking to them, understanding the differences between planning permission and building control and what building control is. So, you know, essentially planning permission is if you need to get a change of use from that building. So if it's not a Class E, you know, you then go through a planning permission process to obtain that. But when you start your building work, before you start your building work, you have to submit your drawings to the building control officers, either privately or through the local authority, the local council department. And then these inspectors arrange specific times to come out, inspect the work that it's been done to a correct standard, and then supply you with a certificate at the end of the building work, which you then have to present to CQC as part of your CQC process to say that your building work was done to a safe standard.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very well put. Another point about the technical drawings, which I would recommend, another reason for getting them done and spending some time on them, is when you come to get quotes and get costs, it puts a level playing field out there. So, you know, you're not left to the assumptions of a builder or a company to know what to quote for. It leaves it all in a level playing field, and you've got the same services in each room, and you know there's no ambiguity around what to quote for. Good. Moving on then. The next question we wanted to cover off was timeframes. How long does it take? So, how long's a piece of string with this one, really? I think the longest project we've been involved in is probably about 2 years from start to finish, which mostly was due to site challenges, getting approvals from landlords and from the landlord really. Absolute nightmare of a project, just from how hard it's been for the client to get the relevant approvals from the council and then the landlord. But what we got up here and what I wanted to run through were some generic timeframes, which we would say are realistic, but there's certainly no guarantees with this. How did you find it, Bobby?
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And bearing in mind, this doesn't include the time it takes for you to find a building, and then the time it takes for you then to complete the legal process of your lease or obtaining your freehold. So, you know, you can add another, you know, possibly up to 12 months at the beginning of this process, just based around that. You know, I've seen some people get all that wrapped up, you know, within 3 months. Some people it's taken literally 12 months for various different reasons with landlords and negotiations. And yeah, planning permissions. So, you know, for us, with a planning permission, we're in a conservation area, so we had to jump through some hoops, and that took around 9 months. So yeah, it's like you said, it's like how long is a piece of string? But ultimately, what I say to anybody is if they're thinking of opening a squat and they want to open a squat and you know you're going to do that, then you need to start now, because realistically, you won't be in that practice for 12 to 24 months minimum from the point you make that decision. You know, it's very unlikely. And some people will get lucky and get in sooner. But if you delay that decision, then it puts you behind by that time again, by the time you start.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's exactly what we find. Generally, by the time we're involved, we're looking at sites and planning sites. As a minimum, it's 6 months from that point. Absolute minimum. Yeah, it can easily stretch out to 12 months, and you know, it does vary so much from site to site. Again, when you're looking at sites, so something to bear in mind, if you're in conservation or you're a listed building, or you know, you've got a tricky landlord situation, factor in that will take longer to negotiate. You know, it's well worth thinking about the extra cost of not being able to open sooner and the revenue you could earn there. So it all the fact comes back to what what you're trying to achieve and what site you're going for. But here's just some rough guidance we across our experience, how long things would take. So I've broken it down into the different stages we work through, and roughly speaking, design and planning, as we say here, 6 to 8 weeks. So when I'm talking design here, I'm talking about the process we've just been through. So the GAs, technical design, the interior design. If you're looking at change of use, then that can take a lot longer. Another thing to factor in here is project lead-in time. Now, this will vary, but most builders, most companies have a lead-in time. It's unusual for a company to be able to drop everything and start the following week. There's procurement to be done, there's teams to organize, and it's worth factoring that in. Some projects we would start within 2 weeks. Sometimes we'd need 4 or 5 weeks to get everything ready. And that's the point of when you've approved the project, right, let's go for it, to actually when works are starting. And then project delivery, we find probably project delivery is the most consistent. The actual work on site, most projects fall between probably 10 and 14 weeks. That's relatively consistent. It's the bit before that, which varies massively depending on the site we find. And it's always worth factoring in time for finishing off snags, CQC, getting stuff ready, handovers. Minimum really of 2 weeks for that. There's quite a lot of prep, isn't there, Bobby, before you actually open the doors?
Yeah, there's a huge amount you have to get done within the practice to get it ready for CQC.
Yeah.
And actually setting the practice up. You've got to buy all your equipment, you've got to get it all set up, you've got to have everything sterilized. And it takes time, and then on top of that, you're managing the new patient inquiries at that time as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of juggling, in those last few weeks.
Yeah. Quick word of warning on CQC. I expect everyone's aware, but there's some quite long lead times on CQC at the moment. Heard 6 months the other day. I don't know if it's the case everywhere. It probably depends what part of the country you're in, but it's worth early stages, very early stages, really trying to engage with CQC and find out the lead times. And in some cases, book an inspection in. You can always move it. I think if 2 or 3 times you can move an inspection. But talk to the CQC advisors, because we had a project just after COVID actually, where they couldn't open for probably 3 or 4 months because they're waiting for a CQC inspection. Everything was done. They're paying for the equipment on the monthly installs. It's quite a painful situation for them because they hadn't got in touch with CQC early enough. So ask that question, get it booked as soon as possible. Good. Moving on. Next question is costs. One we get asked a lot, and it's a very important question. So what I want to try and cover off here is, what does it cost and what varies the cost? And this is a hard question to answer because it really does depend. And what we often find is the biggest cost influences are the 3 things we've got listed here, in our opinion. And the site specifics, as we mentioned earlier, what the site is, what actually, is it a new build? Is it a shell? Is it an existing practice? Is it a bank, an old pub? Whatever it is, that makes a huge difference as to the actual fit out costs. Finishes and specification make a difference as well. Whether what level spec you want to go to, and also equipment choices. Those 3 factors probably could, we'd find would make a huge difference to the differences in cost. But want to try and give some practical advice here, and things you can do to get the maximum return on your investment. And we split the costs in our experiences from the angle of fit out, what we get involved in, the hard fit out, if you like. There's a lot more to practice cost than just that, but we split it into design, the build works, and then the surgery fit out. And I've got here some guidelines, which we're looking at back over our projects that we've completed. Design between 4 and 12, building works. So this is a meter rate, so 1250 to 2500, and these are excluding VAT, and that is the fit out cost of a building. So if you had 100 square meters and you wanted to do an entry, like fairly standard basic fit out, and it was a shell, for example, you'd probably be looking around the 1250 for your building work fit out plus VAT. And then your surgery fit out, so this is your equipment and your furnishings. And there's a big variance here because of all sorts of different types of equipment and models and specifications you can get, but somewhere between 25 to 50k per surgery. Allowing for a chair, suction pump, compressor, X-ray stools, your cabinetry. Yeah, one thing I would say is early on, share your budget and get talking to people who know what they're doing and be open and honest, because if you are, then you can work together with someone to hit your budget and make sure you achieve it. It's very hard if you're given a very unrealistic budget sometimes. Say, look, we're trying to open a squat for 100 grand. It's very hard from a design point of view to try and design a practice and spec a practice to hit a budget if the budget's not clear, or it's not obvious exactly what that's including. So be open and work with someone, I would suggest. Projects which we find go smoothest are where we can work with a client, look, what is they're trying to achieve, and what's the budget, and then working together to design it and fit it out and spec it to a level which is affordable to them. What would you say, Bobby?
Yeah, no. I agree with all of that. The only other thing I would add to that is being very careful when you are starting out with what equipment you decide to choose, and with how much you spec it in the beginning. So I think what often the temptation is to make the place so glamorous that it breaks the bank, because you sometimes feel that's what's needed when it's actually not the case. And then the other thing I would mention on that is the amount of surgeries you spec out to begin with is something to keep a very close eye on. There is no point shelling out, £50,000, to kit out an additional surgery or two additional surgeries if you don't have the patience to fulfill that. It makes no sense for your cash flow as a business. So by all means, have everything plumbed, wired, and ready to go. And then essentially, as and when you have capacity, then that room can essentially be fitted within a week. Pretty much from scratch. But you're better off holding that cash in the bank to sustain your cash flow as a business until you can use it.
Yeah, very good advice. Fully agree. I think most squats we would do, we wouldn't fit out all the surgeries, start off with, plumb them, prep them. But yeah, perhaps 2 surgeries initially, because as Bobby said, it's very quick and easy to fit those out in future. We actually had a situation probably last, or 2 or 3 weeks ago now, where I got called out to a call from a practice down in South London, which I knew the site because I went around it probably 3 years ago, as looking at the site and starting to design it. We didn't actually get involved in the project, but went back down to do the project, and quite a sad story really. They had multiple issues with the works. They had leaks through the ceiling. They had suction pipework break. They had compressor lines split. And got talking to the team, and they had a real nightmare with the actual fit out. And just a word of warning is, when you come to get costs for things, just bear in mind you generally get what you pay for. And sometimes what looks the cheapest on paper can actually be the most expensive in the long run. And this dentist had gone for, I'd say, probably the cheapest quote, and had a catalogue of disasters with failed fittings, incorrectly specified pipework, and leaks, and it cost him thousands and thousands of pounds in repair works, in cancelling visits, in loss of income. So it's worth thinking long term. There's different elements to setting up what something costs. Sometimes it's, you look at the quotes, you can look at the time it's going to take and how much of your time it's going to take as well. But also the risk. If something goes wrong, or it's delayed, or there's issues, that's going to cost you more to sort out. So I like what you say, Bobby, is there's the sort of different pots of cost when you're starting a project. There's, the quote, there's your time, how much time you've got to invest to manage it, to project it, to make it happen. And there's also the risk of, if this goes wrong, or extra things are going to need, or repairs, remedials, etc. That's also a cost. So it's worth bearing in mind the sort of the bigger picture, isn't it?
Yeah, no, 100%. The way I would frame it, just to give an example, is for example, sometimes get asked the question, should we just buy a chair from China for £2,000? And yeah, the simple answer to that is no. And the reason why, although you might save yourself, £50,000, 15, sorry, or whatever it is, depending on what chair you buy, at up front, when that chair goes down, when you're a fully functioning practice and no engineer can service it or fix it or wants to, if you're taking, on average, £2,000 a day in turnover, if you lose a week, you've lost £10,000. That's just in one room. And then if that rolls into a second week, essentially you've lost what you could have just paid for a decent chair in the first place, with no loss of earnings. But it's false economy when you're looking at equipment purchases. Rightly, like you said, if you're trying to find things that are too cheap, then you have to think about the long term and the viability of your practice, and the service that you want to provide to your patients as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the team that you're trying to look after, there's nothing worse than trying to retain or losing or frustrating a new associate because they've been given a £3,000 Chinese chair, which isn't suitable for use. Yeah, very, very good point. Leads us on to our next topic, which is about dental equipment. So I get a lot of questions around choosing dental equipment, and there's a huge variety these days. And I'd say there's no right or wrong, but there are some key things to factor in. As an engineer myself, repairing dental equipment, brought up installing dental equipment, I have quite an in-depth understanding of what's available and what suits different needs really. And here's just some points here just to consider. Comfort is a two-way thing, and I'd like to just spend some time on this because there's the patient comfort. And in fairness, these days, most chairs are relatively comfy. There's quite advanced vinyls and cushions available from most manufacturers. But you've got to consider what sort of treatments you're doing. And, there are certain chairs out there which are great for, half an hour appointments, quick checkups. But if you're looking to do longer cases and the patient's going to be in the chair for 2-3 hours, really think about that. You don't want your patient shuffling around and being uncomfortable whilst they're in the chair. It's something they'll really notice if they are uncomfortable. And it's often not a expensive upgrade to go for like luxury upholstery or stitched upholstery to get that extra patient comfort. It might only be £1,000 or a small, relatively small uplift, which makes a big difference in patient experience. We often find patient touch points as a patient comes into a practice. What it looks like is one touch point. How they're spoken to by the receptionist, another touch point. How comfortable they are as they sit down in that chair. It's a high tension moment as they're sat in that dental chair. Make them as comfortable as possible. It definitely help relieve their anxiety. And working ergonomics, super important. And some manufacturers out there, ADEC, for example, they're really big on working ergonomics, and it's so important. It's not to say there aren't other manufacturers who are also good with this, but it's so important that as a dentist, you're thinking about your health long term. It's a career. You don't want to be working on a chair which is, not correct for you and not set up correctly or doesn't have the features you need to deliver dentistry in a way which won't damage you. I mean, if you looked at dentists who work in pain, I think ADEC did a study a few years back, and about 40% of dental professionals work in pain, and they get used to living with it, going to physio and doing yoga or whatever you have to do to deal with that. And that's a cost actually, but it's it's not just the cost. This is your body. It's very important obviously to look after that, and it's really important to consider that when you're choosing dental equipment, I would say. Any comments on that, Bobby? You're an ADEC fan, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm a big ADEC fan. Yeah, you already know. But yeah, no, I agree with that completely. So, from our perspective in our practice, we do a lot of long treatments, a lot of implant surgery. So for us, it was crucial, to have a chair that's comfortable, that's functional. We didn't get top of the range, but every single patient that comes and sits in our chairs says how comfortable it is, and how relaxed that they felt. So yeah, that's a big thing for us. And using a company like ADEC, as you well know, the support from our equipment company that's local to us, the reliability. We've never had a problem with our chair. People always get worried. We only had one surgery running for around about 14-15 months. And everybody was always like, well, you need a second surgery in case that surgery ever goes down. It never went down, ever. We've used what I particularly have used ADEC chairs for, well, since I pretty much graduated. And even in the practice where I was for 7 years, it was just an absolute workhorse. But it just goes down to what you said about the reliability. You want to use equipment that you know is going to last and function, and that you get your money's worth out of it.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Reliability is a really important point because there's nothing worse than share going down, and there aren't the engineers to back it up. There are some brands out there which are less known, and there's not the support available in the UK, which you have with some of the more leading brands. So, I personally wouldn't recommend buying a brand of equipment where there's no UK, specific support for it. And there's a reason why brands like Belmont, ADEC, Cavo, they've got strong standing in the UK because they've got the support, they've got the dealer networks. So some brands, you'll tie yourself to a company that have got exclusivity for the UK, and you can only get parts and engineers that are trained through that one company. You don't really want to be tied. If something was to happen, you want flexibility to be able to, get repairs and get maintenance widely available. So it's always worth researching that. And another thing I'd recommend is go to the showrooms. Go and see the equipment before you buy it. Go to the shows. Make sure you can experience it and see the options and talk it through. The showrooms are a great experience. I thoroughly recommend before you buy a chair, go to the showrooms and meet the companies and the reps behind it. They're there to do business and to give advice to dentists. So it's definitely worth it. Good. Is there anything else you want to mention from a equipment point of view, Bobby?
No, I think I mean there are a few other questions that come in. Off the top of my head, suction motors, do you go single or do you go central? That's quite a common question.
Yes. Yeah, and it comes down to the design and the planning of it, really. There's both are options, and there's no right or wrong, and there's pros and cons of both. If you have single surgery suction pumps, you often have to put those in the surgery. That takes up space. You get the smell, you get the noise. But the other thing is that generally costs more. If you're doing sort of say more than 2-3 surgeries, it costs more to have individual suction pumps, generally from a maintenance point of view as well. But it does mean if one pump goes down, it only affects that surgery. So that's quite a big plus. Central, it's good to have it outside the surgery. You don't lose the storage space and you don't get the noise. But then if you're all reliant on one suction pump, then if that goes down, then all the rooms are affected. So general rule of thumb is if you can have a central system which has a backup, you get the best of both worlds. So it's not always possible, but if you can design your practice so you have, say for example, you've got 4 surgeries, you have 2 surgeries on one pump, and then you have a second pump which serves the other 2 surgeries, and then you have a link between those 2 pumps. So should one go down or need maintenance, then you can just do a changeover valve, and then the other pump can serve all the surgeries. And that way, you don't have if one pump goes down, you won't lose suction. You'll always have suction, but also you keep the plant equipment, the noisy, smelly plant equipment out of the surgery. Have it in a central plant room. Same goes for compressors. Try and have fail over. The cost of losing 2 or 3 surgeries for a day is astronomical. It's worth investing in your plant equipment. It must be designed in. It can't be an afterthought. Plant room needs to be well ventilated. It needs to be sound attenuated. Needs to be close enough. It all needs to be designed out in that technical design stage earlier. Very, very important. By an engineer, someone who knows what they're doing. Seen it as afterthought too many times, and it's at the end of the day, it's the heart and lung of your practice. You can't see a patient without a suction pump or a compressor.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. And sometimes it gets overlooked.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. There's also future proofing is really important, and there's a lot of developments of equipment at the moment. We're seeing a lot coming out next year. The IDS show a lot of AI being involved in dental equipment these days. It might be a bit early for that exactly now, but it's going to go that way. And future proofing, running data cables to your dental chair and to your suction pump, it won't be long before they're all webbed together, Internet of Things, and you can manage or see the status of your equipment, or your engineer will be able to through the internet. So it's thinking ahead as well. Dental equipment certainly isn't what it was even 10 years ago when I came in the industry. It's changed a lot. Good. Okay, fine. Well, that's the last of our 5 questions. I did have 3 case studies, which I thought it might be helpful if I just ran through a bit of an overview of some 3 projects we've completed, just to give a bit of a flavour for some squats we've done, try and give some practical tips, and hopefully it's of value. So the first squat to focus on is a project we opened, a squat we opened probably, it was 2 years ago now. Yeah, in Marston Dental, which was actually just across the road from where Sir Captain Tom Moore did the laps in Marston Mortain in Bedfordshire just after COVID. So it's a delightful practice. This is. It's a two surgery practice, and it's in a new build. I've got here some photos and a bit of a summary of it. So it was 700 square foot. It was two surgeries, but it was a really good shape. It was a nice square, you can hopefully see on the screen. And we fitted out one surgery to start off with, and then about a year ago we did the second surgery. It was a simple shell and just the ground floor. Project duration was 10 weeks. Fairly entry-level spec. It wasn't a low spec, but it was a fairly basic spec. The project cost was £200,000 plus VAT. We designed it, we built it, we fitted it out. It's just literally 4 walls when we took it over, and then we put the equipment in as well. So it's just some photos of the project. Love the desk. We put in a feature desk, a bespoke made desk, which was a bit of an investment. I think this desk was about £7,000, but it's a real eye catcher. It's bespoke made with a Corian top and a Corian front and some Acu panels, and it's a real centerpiece to the reception area, which is, it looks really great. It's more of the desk there. Corridor down to the surgeries, and then this is surgery 1. Again, clean, simple, but effective. Some low-level lighting around the cabinetry. It gives it a nice plush feel to it. It's not expensive to do, and looks great. And finished off with a Belmont Voyager, super reliable, great value, and a real workhorse. And just a shot of the dental cabinetry. Very functional. The next project was a bit different to this. This is in Cambridgeshire. This is an old dairy, bit of a different one. We finished this earlier in the year, actually. I think they moved in January this year. So this used to be a dairy, believe it or not. So it was quite a challenging project. And given the shape of the building, had 2 floors. So it had floors to 2 surgeries on the ground floor and 2 on the top floor. And this steep apex roof, which was a challenge in the surgery. So it took quite a lot of design effort. And having a split suction pump, like we said, suction pump for the ground floor, suction pump for the first floor, and then linking those systems together so that in the case of failover, you had a backup. So run through the specs on this. It's 2,100 square foot. Yeah, it was an old barn, so it was quite a lot of fit out here. When it took it over, it was in a bit of a state, so it needed quite a lot of work to turn it into a hygienic dental practice. It's got a space of 5 surgeries. We fitted out 4. Took 14 weeks. And the total cost was nearly 400 grand plus VAT. We actually fitted out all 4 surgeries in this case and just left the 5th one empty. And got some photos of it. So being in a rural area, had a nice car park, and you can see in the background the current dairy. So very much on a farm. Bit of an interesting one. And the design of it was different as well, I'd say. It was quite traditional design, as you can see here. So perhaps not everyone's cup of tea, but it really links with the building. It's not a listed building, but I think they do a fair job of coming up with a colour scheme which linked with the area. Wasn't too bling or too futuristic. I went for a Belmont Eurus S8 chair. Great chairs these are, ambidextrous, super comfy. A lot of intuitive features in the delivery table, and a Belmont X-ray, which are the best X-rays on the market in my opinion. Yeah, great surgery. Lastly, we have a squat we opened in the summer this year. So this was one we completed in Tame in Oxfordshire for a new customer of ours, and it was a listed building actually. So it came with some challenges. It's a full surgery practice. We fitted out just 2 to start off with, but 1,200 square foot. Listed building used to be an Arga oven showroom. Had CBCT and 4 surgeries. Did it in 12 weeks. It's a very tight program. When we started, we found issues with some of the beams. We had to change some of the beams, which we weren't expecting, and we still had to try and stick to a program. So it was a very, very busy site, but it's quite a high spec, and the total cost for this was 350 plus VAT. And just got some images of the project. So a really nice bespoke desk. Again, custom made, really high impact, nice fridge, drinks for patients. Had aircon throughout, some nice feature lighting, and I think what did a great job is retaining some of the original features. So this exposed brickwork, which we'll see more of, and the use of a lot of timber, a lot of oak, which just really nods to the heritage of the building. We had to put in a false floor because it was all you couldn't in a listed building. We weren't able to chase into the existing floor because it's a listed fabric. You can't disrupt it. So put in a ramp and a raised floor, and then you could run all your services underneath that. And then quite calming and neutral colours in the surgery. Nice push to open cabinetry, handle free. Cashmere, I think this is, with exposed brickwork in the surgeries. Yeah, very nice finish to it, and a Belmont Voyager chair in one surgery. Then I think the other surgery had a Belmont, yes, Belmont Compass. So hopefully that gives an overview. Right, I thought we're nearly up time, so sorry if I've overrun a little bit, but I thought we'd just spend a few moments on a couple of questions. We might not be able to get around all of them, but we'll make a note of them all, so we can come back to the ones we don't get onto. Bobby, do you want to pick a question and we can go for it?
Yeah, we might as well just go through them one by one. So anything that's building related, you can answer, and anything more practice related, I'll go through it. So first one was, would 750 square foot be enough for two surgery practice? I think the case, the first one you just showed, that was 700 square foot, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. If you've got the width for it, and the shape of the practice is such, then absolutely. Yeah, we've done a free surgery in, I think, 800 square foot once. It's a nice square unit. So get the floor plans, ping them across, and we'll see what we can do.
And what are your views on grade 2 listed buildings?
Yeah, we've done quite a few in listed buildings. It's certainly possible. They do have challenges. You need listed building consent before you can start works. You generally need to get listed building consent because to practice you need to make changes to the fabric of the building. It's not a no. It's going to cost more and it's going to take longer. But it's not a no.
Yeah, brilliant. Which is better, leasehold or freehold property? In my opinion, this comes down to a number of different factors. So if financially feasible, then preference for me would always be freehold for a number of different reasons. So you own the property, you don't need any permissions from any landlords to make any changes then to that property. The property will generally always appreciate in value, as most property does in the UK. And then if you ever decide to sell your practice, you can choose to retain the freehold and receive a rental income once you sell your business, or you sell it at the increase in value of whatever that would have been at that time. However, if it's not financially feasible or you have no interest in being a property owner, then the quickest way to start would be by obtaining a leasehold. And without a doubt, you'll be able to get your business going much quicker by going for a leasehold than a freehold. But that's my thoughts on it. You got any thoughts on that, Murray?
No, I agree with you. From our small perspective, if the client has the freehold, it happens a lot quicker, and because you don't need the landlord approvals, it certainly simplifies the process. So I'd agree with you. The preference would be freehold, but it's not always applicable, is it? Depending on the long-term plans of the business.
Yeah. Second-hand equipment dealers. Murray, do you guys do second-hand equipment? I've never actually asked you this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good question. We do occasionally, yeah. Although would just err on the side of caution with second-hand equipment. There is a company in the UK, I think there's only one, who specializes in second-hand equipment, and that's pretty much all they do, and happy to provide their details. But as an engineer myself, I see the state at which equipment comes out. It's very rare for someone to throw away equipment or remove equipment which is working. Unless it's got a problem, generally it's kept. So if equipment's in the second-hand market, well, why is it? And yes, you can refurbish dental equipment, and we've done it ourselves, but you have to spend an awful lot of time and money to get equipment up to a level where it's good enough to do a long period of time. And a lot second-hand equipment, you probably only get a lot of time it's 15, 20 years old anyway, and you're only going to get another 4 or 5 years out of it, and then you have to buy a new chair. So really think about the long term on that. And in our experience of supplying second-hand equipment, it's unreliable. The circuit boards, the wiring, the hydraulics, that's all original. You're not going to change that. And if that goes down, you're really, really stuffed. So I'd really look at the economics on it, because on paper, if you looked across 5, 10 years, you'd be challenged the fact it would be any cheaper to buy second-hand equipment.
Yeah, and for all those reasons, I would never start my practice with second-hand equipment.
Mm.
I didn't buy anything second-hand, and I wouldn't still, exactly for the reasons you just said. Arpad, when do you need to apply for building regs compliance? At what stage of the project?
Yeah, so it's a good question. This is generally the responsibility of whoever's doing the build, to make the application, or the design. It does depend. Now, it needs to be, you need to submit your drawings, what you're going to be doing, to a building inspector prior to starting. 2 to 3 weeks is what we'd recommend, what we'd try and do. Submit it to the inspector, get their initial comments. So at that point, they'll come back with comments or questions, and sometimes that could be things like, right, you need to have an extra door here for fire compliance. It will be actual changes. So you want to do it before you start works. But you won't get sign off until right at the end, when you've had your final inspection, the electrical certificate's done, the project's been signed off, it's been built as per the plans. At that point, then you'll get your certificate of completion, which is what Bobby referred to earlier. So yeah, apply to it before you start work, but you won't get the sign off until right at the end.
Yeah, brilliant. Neil, thanks for your feedback. Slightly off topic, but what percentage of squat practices open as associate led? So in my experience, not very many. I couldn't give you an exact percentage, but pretty much none of the squats that I know of, bar a few, have opened fully associate led, for a number of different reasons. The biggest thing with opening a fully associate led practice is it eats into your cash flow significantly from day one. So you need to have a bigger buffer and a bigger reserve before you start to break even, because you're now paying associates. Whereas if you're a principal-led squat, it's much easier to build the cash flow within that business and then transition that into a more associate-led business as time goes on. So it's not impossible. People do it, but you just need to look at the financials very, very carefully, and to make sure that that is viable, essentially. Harish, I'm left-handed and I like the knee brake chairs. I understand they're not ambidextrous, but can it be changed to right-handed if that's required in the future?
Yeah, yeah, good question. Unfortunately, not. No, it's a gap in the market. If someone wants to produce a left-handed knee brake chair, then they've got your business, Harish. But unfortunately, at the moment, there isn't a. I mean, the Belmont S6, it's called the Euros S6, is the knee brake which everyone goes to, and it's only available in right-handed at the moment. But stay tuned, there is a new chair coming out, we believe, next year, which is going to be ambidextrous and knee brake. So unfortunately, at this moment in time, it's not. But there are some things you can do, actually. You can have a standalone knee brake chair without the spittoon and the bracket table, and then you have a separate bracket table, like a cart, and then a ceiling mount light. It's not quite the same as the Belmont knee brake, but it is kind of a bit of a compromise. And left-handers, that would suit if it's set up right. So not all hope is lost.
Brilliant. From Anonymous, what's the minimum you reckon goes to set up a one surgery practice? I'm assuming they mean cost.
Yeah, I guess so. Either cost or size of the building, but yeah. What do you reckon? From a cost angle?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I think you need to have, a good budget, 200 to 250,000 pounds irrespective, when you factor into everything. Do you set many one surgery practices up?
Very, very rare. Yeah, unless it's like a specialist, like a specialist endo or something like that, then very rare. But yeah, I'd agree. I mean, you don't really open a squat even with one surgery for less than 200, do you, really, these days?
Yeah. Somebody, I'm not sure if it's the same person, were quoted £400,000 for setting up a two surgery squat. It wasn't a question, I think it was more just a comment.
Yeah. And I would say to that, I mean, look at the site, look at the equipment. You could do that. You could easily set up. You could easily spend that sort of money. It just depends, doesn't it? It's so hard to put a broad brush on costings, because there's so many variables. We've done single surgeries for 100 grand sometimes. When I talk about a single surgery refurbishment, if the spec is up there and it's all bells, all singing, all dancing, you can spend a crazy amount for a very small, just literally one room refurb. It just depends. So get into the detail, understand exactly what you want, walk through the design process, spend a bit of time understanding exactly what you want out of your practice before getting it costed up, because there's so many variables, particularly the site.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, I think that's all the last of the questions. Fantastic. Yeah, thank you everybody for listening. Like Murray said at the beginning, watch out for part 2. So this one was focused around the building aspects, and the next one will focus a bit more around the business aspects of setting up a squat, marketing, recruitment, team building, and share some insights into that. Murray, you got any last words?
Thanks, Bobby. No, it's been great. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for your experience and all you've shared with us. And thanks everyone who's joined. Trust it's of value. Give us a shout, any questions. We're only a phone call away or a message away. And trust you'll have a good evening.
All right, fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.